The next talk presented by Ground 1234 is Journey to Zero Trust, Joshua Danielson and Brittany Little Delete Garzarda.
Hello, my name is Brittany Little. I'm from Copart, and we are going to give you all some insight into our journey to Zero Trust. So our agenda for the day, we're going to start with a quick intro of the team. Then we're going to go into what Zero Trust is, what it means to us specifically. We're going to discuss our solutions that we've come up with and that we ended up choosing, and provide some insight into some of the lessons we've learned so far that we think are key to having a successful deployment. And we're going to close with how we plan to expand our Zero Trust journey, and then we will give some closing points. So I focus more on the product management here at Copart, and my primary focus is around identifying security risks, developing strategic implementation plans for security products, and then communicating with key stakeholders. So.
Hi everyone, myself Dilip Kurazada, Head of AppSec at Copart. With my background in security, automation and engineering, allowed me to build and deploy solutions for a wide range of use cases at Copart.
And Josh Danielson, I'm Chief Information Security Officer here at Copart. Being here for quite a few years, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great people and do some great things here. So diving into the next slide, some caveats before we jump in. What is Zero Trust? Well, there's no one-size-fits solution for everyone. Anyone who spent some time in this space knows there's a lot of controversy and debates of what Zero Trust even means. The industry still lacks some standardization with the SASE to Zero Trust networking access and otherwise too. So for the purpose of this conversation, we've structured it in a few different categories of use cases and also solutions to help us have a good talk and hopefully have some value to some other people to understand what's a good use case for your programs too. A lot of organizations I know focus on replacing their VPN products and solutions with a Zero Trust or an SAE-based type of solution. For this purposes, we're actually not going to focus too much on VPNs, as a lot of our applications and resources are actually on the cloud. So we'll talk a little bit about those use cases, but I know that's a primary use case that a lot of organizations function on. That's not our primary use case here. Also, the last piece, I know the traditional industry standard may be even focused around pattern matching and different traffic patterns. That's not a case what we'll be covering here. So with that, we'll dive in and talk a little bit more.
Yep. So same question that Josh just asked, what is Zero Trust? And there's a couple different definitions floating around. And we went ahead and just pulled one from Cloudflare that says Zero Trust security is an IT security model that requires strict identity verification for every person and device trying to access resources on a private network, regardless of whether they are sitting within or outside of the network perimeter. So again, this is just one of the general definitions that's out there, but this could mean, Zero Trust could still mean different things to different organizations, depending on the situation, use cases that you've defined. So really just have to continue to ask questions like, are we specifically talking about corporate owned workstations that are connecting to cloud apps or on-prem apps? Are we referring to doing device authentication of these? Or are we also looking at doing a device health check? In addition, are we including personal mobile devices or personal workstations? And then also, again, are we going to be doing device authentication and device health of those mobile devices as well? So really just continuing to ask these questions. And that's what we did to ultimately help us define what Zero Trust was to Copart. And so we really started evaluating what we already had in place today. And we use an IDP to do things like SSO and MFA to evaluate identity. But the next step for us in Zero Trust was specifically focusing on device authentication and device health. And we want to ensure that all corporate owned workstations that connect to our email and internal apps are authenticated with a Zero Trust digital certificate. That includes MFA as well. And then additionally, each of the workstations must pass a device health check. So this is really meaning they must have things like antivirus, network security, and encryption enabled. In the future, we do want to add additional security requirements on the health side, but this is the baseline that we've started with. If both of these things are fulfilled on a corporate owned device, the device will gain access to our specific resources. If there is no zero trust agent installed, or the device has a low trust score, meaning it's missing CrowdStrike or Umbrella or something like that, then they're not going to gain access to our Copart resources. Again, this is just what we've done to define what zero trust means to us. Now I'm going to pass it off to Dilip so he can talk a little bit more about how we defined our access use cases.
Thank you, Brittany. So to define our use cases, we need to identify the services or apps we want to protect, and also the consumers of these services, say an user or an application service itself. Based on who is accessing what, we have categorized zero trust use cases as below. If you see one of the use cases, user to cloud. Consider if your company is using a lot of software as a service applications, like Salesforce, Slack, Zoom, Office 365, etc. And in these scenarios, are you utilizing any mobile device management solutions to handle workstations or endpoints? And then the second use case is around user to on-prem services. In this scenario, consider if your company is trying to protect internal TCP services like RDP, SSH, or HTTPS. And typical answers include network access control solutions, or basically VPNs that are out there that can help you provide these remote access, especially during this pandemic. And then the third use case is machine to machine. In a typical virtual machine based deployments, production application environment allows all traffic from one server to the other, or may not be restricted by a network. So our usage should be restricted only to app traffic from a server or container. But in a container-based deployments, we use Calico policies or service mesh architecture to provide network-level access or application-based access. Consider if there is any orchestration tool is needed, say Docker or Kubernetes, for managing these machine-to-machine access. So once we know our use cases, we have below zero trust solution categories in the market. So in a typical network-based solution type, an employee accessing Office 365 is not directly allowed. As you can see, an IDP is required for the employee to access these cloud solution. And the zero trust is the solution that is helping the employee to provide device health and device cert for the employee to access these cloud solutions. And in this scenario, endpoint agent is not needed. On the network-based deployments, employee accessing Office 365 is denied, and you require an IDP to access it. And our zero trust solution is actually integrated with IDP to allow the process flow or access flow to this application. In this scenario, the IDP is directly tied to zero trust solution, so only traffic coming from zero trust gateway is allowed to be accessed. In this scenario, employee have an endpoint agent deployed on his device, and all the traffic will go through that endpoint agent and routes through the zero trust gateway before it reaches to the actual Office 365. And then the third one is cert-based deployments, where employee still needs to go through IDP to access these Office 365. But in this scenario, these IDPs are directly tied to these zero trust solutions to allow continuous checks on device health and trust. In this scenario, employee provides these certificate and health through the agent installed on the endpoint, and it continuously monitors through the gateway, and then the gateway is going to work with IDP to allow or not allow the access. Let's dive more into these solution types and see some of our findings in these scenarios. On the network-based type of deployments, it's a most traditional definition of zero trust, like Josh mentioned. This just provides the bare metal zero trust solution here. And it's an easiest or quickest to deploy, as they integrate with mobile device management solutions, or it's a plugin needed to be added to web browser, since it's a easy deployment in that part of things. In this scenario, device health is having a least priority, as you require a different source to provide that. And it might be the easiest way to replace your VPN as well. Let's move on to the next one, which is the net-based endpoint based on the network side of things deployment. This is similar to a VPN based solution. And as you can see or talked about in the access flow, we need a gateway in here, and the gateway should be restricting the traffic to these IDP or the actual applications. So in that scope, we require the applications to support IP restrictions. And in this type of solution deployments, consider if any privacy issues are encountered upfront. As example, the gateway might be looking at traffic if you not properly configure. The endpoint might be looking at all the traffic irrespective of corporate traffic or your personal traffic. And what we have seen so far is these solutions require the app to run all the time, and it might include running on your mobile devices, which might incur a lot of battery life, etc. And then the third one is CERT-based deployments, where in the endpoint you have an agent installed that provides the device cert and device health. This apps or this type of deployments basically require digital certificate to be presented whenever you try to access any SaaS application for device authentication. And also the agent must be compliant with the device health policies like Brittany mentioned before. And this requires integration for cloud-based resources and probably less privacy concern as compared to the network-based, as it might not need to look at all the traffic that goes through the application, and it shouldn't be passing through the gateway. Let's look at the solutions and the gaps we have found across the different types of products which we have evaluated during our POC of these solutions. One type of the product is basically, these are like cost is very affordable to the companies, and leadership is very good and in the sense of management and also tool development kind of things. But the problem we have faced is the product maturity. They only solve certain use cases, not all the use cases that we might be looking at. And also the problem with product maturity being they have defined updates that are already being managed. And for the product 2 type of, this is another type of solution probably around the network based. You can see it's a new solutions that are out in the market, and it's been very successful in being utilized by many companies. And the main problems we have seen so far with them is employee experience around mobile apps. As I mentioned, this could involve the kind of VPN deployment on those devices and continuously be on, which might consume battery life of those devices. And also on the product 3, you can see it's similar to the network based. It's an endpoint based. It has the same upside around the market penetration, and it has provided a lot of value for device health and trust compared to the other solutions as well. And most of these solutions have kept in mind or being managed by multiple companies, have helped them shape the product very much defined for the new use cases that are coming up. For example, continuous device health and trust. And the major disadvantages or cons in this is considering that like trust coverage or health coverage across different types of devices and also different types of operating systems, say Linux, Windows, and mobile devices. And employee experience in deploying these apps, as well as registration and all those have been a difficult task for them. And finally, we'll come back to talk about who did we choose and based on what factors did we decide that. We have chosen CERT-based deployment for endpoints because of aligning support for technologies in use. For example, most of these solutions require to be deployed by Azure or basically SCCM for Windows deployments, and also some of these solutions, mobile device management solutions, to deploy the software across different platforms, say Windows or Mac environments, depending on what type of endpoints do you have. And flexible device health policies, which means like Brittany mentioned before, this could be anywhere ranging from, do you have your endpoint antivirus solution running? Do you have your network security solution running on your device or configured with that? Or do you have data encryption in place for different types of platforms, say Mac OS or Windows or Android, to support the use cases like personal mobile devices to be secured as well. And the next one is Copart is heavy on SaaS applications. As Josh mentioned before, most of our use cases is around protecting our SaaS apps, and some of our in-house built solutions that are tied with our IDP solutions to provide SSO and MFA, and endpoint or third-based solution directly integrating with IDP solutions have helped us to even cover most of our HTTP-based apps within our company, or internal apps. And third-based solution actually helping us to provide device trust in continuous basis and also being monitored continuously. So some of these solutions ideally come up with managing these device certificates as well. So that has helped us in deploying these third-based solutions within our environment. And these solutions do not typically replace VPN, in the sense they don't work on the network-based layer. So you don't need to change the underlying protocols we have already. And endpoint third-based, these mostly run on the application layer, in the sense all these are HTTPS traffic and being monitored for any anomalies, or basically blocking the traffic based on your device health and trust. Finally, the vendor had strong technical leadership team and vision. Working with our leadership teams, we were able to meet Copart use cases and being flexible in deploying these solutions to us. Let me pass it on to Brittany for some of our deployment caveats.
Yep. Thanks, Dilip. So before we talk a little bit more in detail about how we actually deployed this and some of the roadblocks that we ran into, I want to give a little bit of detail about our environment specifically, so you can have a better understanding. At Copart, we have about 8,000 employees located in 12 different countries. About 1,500 to 2,000 employees are considered corporate employees, but the remaining large portion do work in our yards and are more considered to not be technical employees, blue collar workers. So really having to pay attention to anything that requires a lot of technical knowledge in terms of enrollment and things like that. We had to be careful about those things. But now as we worked through this deployment, we ran across many lessons learned and really want to highlight some key items that we think are useful for a successful deployment. So our first one is getting leadership buy-in. From the initial purchasing of a product to the technical side to even the end user experience, the leadership buy-in was needed at all ends of the spectrum to help us push the deployment. Because we had to rely heavily on different teams to help us do things like creating packages and integrating with different systems and trying to push employees to help us volunteer for pilot testing and getting that feedback and ensuring that, we've tested for all of issues that could occur. With so many of these different groups being involved, it was so important for the overall zero trust strategy to be prioritized from top down and ensure that buy-in is coming from the leadership first. So for the second one, another thing we really wanted to pay attention to was privacy transparency. So early on, we started to see areas where employees were getting concerned with the information being tracked by the product being installed on more so their mobile devices, but sometimes on the desktops as well. So in addition to the much needed leadership buy-in that we just spoke about, the buy-in and support from legal and HR was even more important, because we realized we needed to be very transparent with the employees about the information that the app was tracking. And we did this by getting privacy statements and agreements with the product signed and ensuring that these agreements between us and the product were provided to the employee in the initial introduction of the enrollment phase. And anytime we started to involve the employee, we ensured that, we were able to make them feel as comfortable as possible from a privacy perspective. So for some use cases, if people had more questions, then we even looked to have demos available for some employees that allowed them to see the back-end data and logs that we would see in the console, like, hey, this is the information we're seeing, this is the information we're pulling. That way we could just be as transparent as possible and making them feel as comfortable as possible. Number 3 kind of ties directly into number 2. Saving the difficult people for last was something that we realized could help us push forward and show progress in the deployment. Every company has some group of employees that either have legitimate concerns or simply don't want to participate or have extra privacy concerns. And so we just thought that focusing on the larger majority that were willing to participate and willing to help us push along in the deployment would be the best approach. And then once we enroll and get about 98 to 99% of the company completed, we roll back around to those difficult people last and we say, hey, again, making them feel more comfortable and saying we have enrolled this many people and everyone is supporting this. So now what else can we do to get you on board with this? So the next one is addressing the hard topics. So really, you can tell, obviously, we're trying to solve challenges of device authentication and device health across the organization with our strategy. But we're also looking to be able to provide better solutions for things like BYOD and securing personal device use cases as well. So addressing that this will be a challenge that we'll run into, but also one that with this grander strategy, we'll be able to solve and provide a better solution for. So for number 5, the upfront effort to ensure easy enrollment is well worth it. I've mentioned user experience a couple different times, and this really became our main priority. The deployment really can't be successful when employees are unwilling to work with you or you're not making it easy for them. So to be honest, when we first started the deployment of our Zero Trust solution, the end user experience was not as high on our priority list as it should have been. Originally, the enrollment process for Zero Trust on workstations and mobile totaled about 12 to 15 enrollment steps for the employee, which is obviously causing a hassle to not only them, all the people that are enrolling and having to follow these instructions, but also our security team and other teams that are helping us, the support teams and anyone else that's receiving calls. There were times where we were having to handle 10s and 20s of individual calls with questions and people getting stuck in the enrollment and they couldn't figure out what their next step was. Even with the very detailed instructions that, we took feedback and we edited over and over, there was just too many steps in the enrollment process. And so really we had to take a step back as a security team and say, okay, how can we take this feedback and fix this process? How can we suppress as much of these steps that it takes? So what we did was our team worked with some other internal teams at Copart, and then we also worked with the product engineers, and we were able to ensure that the workstation enrollment is actually now zero touch. It doesn't require any engagement from the employee. It just triggers off of the Okta login. And then the mobile enrollment is actually down to 2 to 3 steps. So really this effort on the back end has by far been the most impactful change that we've seen to our Zero Trust deployment so far. And then lastly, if you haven't already noticed, the main component of each of the bullets that I've spoken about before is communication and coordination. From scheduling, testing, identifying individual users and device names per department, per country, coordinating and collaborating for all the things needed to make this a successful deployment cannot be undervalued and has to be really important to the team for a successful deployment. So I'm going to pass it off to Dilip so he can give some insight into what we are planning to do next.
as you can see, we have tackled the use cases of user to cloud. But the coming up, what we are looking for is user accessing any of our internal services, which could be advanced remote access for engineers, which is not a typical VPN, but we like to see device health and trust at the same time while they're accessing SSH or RDP services to our remote systems. And then the other one that we are trying to tackle is machine-to-machine deployment. Since we have identified or addressed all the concerns within our internal architecture as well as the internal teams, we have identified what is our next step to deploy zero trust within our machine-to-machine deployment, so that we can only ensure app traffic has been locked between these two servers and no other traffic is allowed to be flown. Let me pass it back to Brittany.
Yep. So as we mentioned a couple of different times, we've needed a lot of help from others within our team that are not here presenting today, and also external teams within Copart. But we did want to highlight a few other members on our team that continue to play a key role in our deployment. So just want to give thanks there. And then as we close out, really, we have a couple of key takeaways, and one of those is being transparent, really, at all levels of leadership. Teams that are involved in the deployment and employees, being transparent is the biggest piece. And so we really want, if you take anything away, take this one. And also the next one is know your use cases. Define what zero trust means to you and your organization, because it can vary. And there probably isn't going to be a product that's able to solve all of your use cases that you came up with, because many of the solutions are still maturing. So the more you know your use cases, the better you can prioritize them, and the better you're going to be able to find a solution that's going to work for you and this maturing industry. So that's all we have for you, and thank you.
Hey, it's Jeremy and Baby Doll here, and we're with Jay, Dilip, and Brittany. And you just listen to them talk about their journey to zero trust. The first question is, what was the main goal of your zero trust deployment, and do you feel that you've achieved it?
Yeah. So because everyone always has their own definition of our zero trust, that's why I try to emphasize that so much at the very beginning. Our goal was to ensure that every device that has some type of authentication, in this case for us is having a digital certificate, and also passes the device health check as well too, against all of our resources. Primarily, of course, it comes on the cloud side of things. We're an Okta customer. I think that was probably pretty obvious throughout the talk. And then also for on-prem resources as well. We're still in the middle of a phased rollout right now. This is something that's definitely not done within a few months period across around 8,000 different assets. We're a good sized organization, S&P 500, Fortune 1000. So we have to be very mindful of different kind of customer bases, different countries and whatnot too, and time schedules too, so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question is, how do you deploy and manage your certificates to make sure access is limited to just the devices that you've allowed? Or do you allow logins from any device?
So the specific solution we end up going with does the certificate management fully transparent to us. So it's not an issue at all. It's just pretty much saying the agent is kind of a proxy for it. A lot of other solutions, even some very mature solutions, don't even do that piece for you at all though. There's a really prominent Series C kind of company that we really liked a lot that actually doesn't do any of it for you. And you have to maintain your own PKI and your whole certificate store as well too. So, but we've also heard a lot of other customers are able to do different things. They key off, like maybe if it's just part of your domain or some type of SSI, some other signature that they want to be able to key off. But obviously this certificate is always the nicest to have if you can.
Okay, so the follow-up question to that is, so you load an agent on every endpoint?
Correct, and that maintains it, yeah.
Okay, great. It looks like we have one more question coming in, but they're still typing, so we'll wait for them. While we're waiting for the next question, oh wait, we just got the question. Never mind. No more. Don't need the answer. What do you do about printers and devices with no agent capabilities? That's a good question.
Dilip, I could take this one if you want. Did you want to take a chance to take a shot at it though?
You can go ahead, Josh.
Okay. So within our context, we're really focusing on the data itself. So we're really focusing on the data, the actual repository. So if any access, that's any access point or any endpoint that's going to be accessing the data, whether it be email or a database or something along those lines. So IoT in our environment, I think we're really fortunate. We didn't have a lot of need for a lot of these other products that really focus on it. We have printers, obviously, but we're not a huge IoT shop. So we really focus on the data stores themselves. Printers, for the most part, are handling a lot of one-off issues. So it hasn't been a core part of our definition for us.
Okay, great. And what was the net cost decrease or increase? What was the main selling point, and what are some other points?
I think the net cost increase or decrease. I don't know what the baseline is due. Like if it's a comparison. Right now, before we had nothing for Zero Trust, right? Because Zero Trust was a net new line item on our budget, so it wasn't replacing anything else. Although I guess someone could see it supplementing something else like an MDM, but we don't see it as we saw it as a separate line item. Not sure if that answers the question though.
No, I think that's a good answer. Perhaps a more targeted question would be like, what did you think the total cost of deployment was?
Okay, so the tool itself, it depends on what stage you get a company for sure. If you get a Series A and they think you're going to be valuable, to be kind of like a design partner and give them a lot of constructive feedback. For our case, I think with who we decided to partner with, we're in a different demographic geographically, and we also have a lot of different value add because we're in the retail vertical. We had a lot more funny use cases, or not too funny, but they're different and challenging to an area that they saw was a market they want to be able to tackle. So in retail, we got one-to-many issues, we got one device and many employees. That was a nuanced piece that I think we had an opportunity to be able to work with this specific vendor we worked with to be able to add some value.
Okay, excellent. Looks like we have one more question coming in. We'll wait for them to type that. In the meantime, why so many trust issues?
I mean, we had started on our Zero Trust journey like 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, something like that too. So I think we got really fortunate that we were a little bit ahead of the game in that kind of way. Of course, now everyone's talking the Biden administration, Wall Street Journal, everyone's talking about Zero Trust, right? So we really got fortunate that we were a little bit ahead of the game on this piece.
Excellent. Okay, it looks like the last question is, would you be willing to provide more specifics and product information offline in our Discord channel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're not doing it to hide any information. We just don't want to make it a product shaming, bashing, or promoting kind of situation. So that's the reason why we're kind of vague, not at all for any other reason though. But yeah, absolutely, we'll run Talk Shop.
All right, that's excellent. All right, well, that's going to wrap up our Q&A session. If you have any more questions for Brittany, Dilip, or Jay, I encourage you to join our Discord channel. We'll be in the Ground 1, 2, 3, 4 channel. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.